Yun was having a wholesome core training session with Jong-ho, and both of them were genuinely enjoying spending time together. While gymming with her, Jong-ho found himself reflecting on his pathetic life. He thought about how unbelievable it was that the woman he was now having a gym session with was actually his stepmother. His thoughts drifted back to 1 month earlier, when he had first entered the fitness center. At that time, he had been a severely overweight mess, and had finally decided that it was time to drag his sorry self into changing. The main reason behind joining the fitness center was his ex-girlfriend, that constant nagging pain in the neck who had repeatedly told him that he was terrible at fitness training and needed to improve his useless body. She had constantly encouraged him to lose weight, but despite all of that, she eventually dumped his fat self. She had told him that they belonged to completely different worlds. Looking back, he realized that all of the body shaming and humiliation he had endured had been because of his own pathetic weight. Returning to the present, Jong-ho remembered the moment he had first walked into the fitness center like the sweaty disaster he was. He had been surprised to see that there were far more people than he had expected. As soon as he entered, a woman named Miss Jung approached him and asked whether he had come there to sign up. She jokingly commented that women would probably be lining up for him if he managed to lose a little of that extra weight. She also advised him that if he was still uncertain about joining, he should simply enroll first and think about everything afterward. Jong-ho had asked whether there would really be nothing left to think about once he had signed up. During their conversation, another woman approached them and asked Miss Jung whether he was the new prospective member. Miss Jung confirmed that he was and explained that one of Miss Yu's clients had recently quit, leaving an opening. Jong-ho politely explained that he had only come to observe the fitness center that day. However, the moment the woman looked at him, her expression immediately changed, as though something had suddenly clicked in her mind. She stared at him carefully before asking if he was really Jong-ho. Jang-ho became completely confused and wondered how she knew his name. He even thought that perhaps they had met somewhere in the past, although he could not remember her at all. Before he could ask anything else, the woman became emotional and introduced herself. She revealed that she was Soo-yeon. Although Jong-ho still could not recognize her, she immediately stepped forward and hugged him tightly while telling him that she was his mother. As she embraced him, Jong-ho finally began reflecting on his past. He realized that the woman standing before him was indeed Soo-yeon Nuna. She gently corrected him and told him that he should no longer call her Nuna because he was supposed to call her stepmother instead. His memories immediately took him back 10 years into the past. Soo-yeon had been engaged to marry his father and had moved into their house before the wedding. However, not long afterward, tragedy struck when his father died in a devastating car accident. On that terrible day, both Jong-ho and Soo-yeon, along with the rest of the family, had completely broken down with grief. Unfortunately, Soo-yeon's parents had never approved of her relationship with Jong-ho's father because he had been a single father and much older than she was. During the funeral, they had forcibly taken their daughter away from him despite her wishes. After losing the one person he had relied upon the most, Jong-ho had become an easy target for his greedy relatives. They had taken advantage of his vulnerable situation and stolen almost all of his inheritance, leaving him with nothing more than a small studio apartment. With the help of one of his father's close friends, he had barely managed to protect that small portion of his inheritance. In order to escape his greedy relatives, he had even deleted his phone number and completely disappeared from everyone's contact. Now, after 10 long years, Soo-yeon was standing right in front of him once again. After unexpectedly reuniting at the fitness center, the two of them decided to go to a cafe together and enjoy a pleasant lunch. While they were eating, Soo-yeon affectionately tried to feed him, calling him her son. She became emotional and told him that he must have gone through countless hardships during all those years. She explained that after they had been separated, she had returned to look for him, only to discover that the apartment had already been sold and that he had completely disappeared without leaving any trace. She admitted that she had been terrified and had constantly wondered whether something terrible had happened to him. Jong-ho then told her everything that had happened after they had been separated. He explained how his relatives had taken away his inheritance and how difficult his life had become. After hearing the entire story, Soo-yeon became extremely frustrated and angrily declared that his relatives were nothing but trash. She assured him that he no longer needed to worry because, from that moment onward, she would always protect him. Jong-ho gently pointed out that, technically, she was not actually his mother because she had never married his father. However, Soo-yeon immediately disagreed with him. She explained that they had lived together as a family and that, in her heart, it had basically been a common-law marriage. She also reminded him that she had told him many times when he was younger to call her mother. Jong-ho admitted that he had always wanted to know what had happened to her after they had been separated. He also asked why she had become a personal trainer. Soo-yeon explained that after her parents had dragged her away from his family, she had eventually left her own home because they had refused to allow her to marry a single father. Instead, they had tried to force her into marrying an extremely wealthy man whom she had no desire to marry. She confessed that she had never understood why her parents had separated them simply because of that. With tears in her eyes, she lamented that she had lost her son, while he had been forced to suffer through all those painful years alone. Overcome with anger and resentment, she cursed her father and all of her relatives, saying that they all deserved to drink themselves to death together. As Jung-ho listened to her emotional outburst, he remembered that he still had a lecture the following morning. However, Soo-yeon continued drinking until she became heavily intoxicated. While drunk, she repeatedly told him that she regretted everything that had happened and insisted once again that she was his mother. She promised that she would take care of him from then onward because he had always been her first love as a son. Shortly after saying those words, she lost consciousness and passed out due to excessive drinking. The following morning, Soo-yeon slowly opened her eyes after spending the entire night suffering from the effects of heavy drinking. She gently held her forehead while trying to gather her thoughts, but the pain made it difficult for her to remember everything that had happened the previous night. As she slowly sat up and looked around the room, she suddenly realized that she was in a place she did not recognize. After thinking for a few moments, fragments of the previous night slowly returned to her memory, making her realize that Jung-ho had brought her there after she became completely drunk. Still feeling dizzy, Soo-yeon slowly walked downstairs to look around the apartment. As soon as she reached the living room, she noticed a handwritten note carefully placed on the table. She immediately picked it up and began reading it. The note had been left by Jung-ho before he left for the university. In it, he explained that he had an early morning lecture and had already gone to attend his classes. He also wrote that she should not worry about leaving immediately and encouraged her to rest properly before returning home because she was still recovering from her hangover. After reading the note, Soo-yeon felt an overwhelming sense of guilt. She lowered her head and blamed herself for becoming so intoxicated that her son had been forced to take care of her throughout the night. She thought that she had probably caused him a great deal of trouble. Feeling embarrassed by her own behavior, she promised herself that she would treat him to something truly delicious later as an apology. However, another thought suddenly crossed her mind. She realized that she did not even know where Jung-ho was living. Hoping that his apartment was somewhere close to the fitness center, she immediately opened the map application on her phone and searched for his address. As soon as the location appeared, her eyes widened in disbelief. She discovered that his apartment was almost 2 hours away from the gym. She became completely shocked after realizing that he had been making such a long journey every single day just to attend the fitness center. She quietly wondered how difficult it must have been for him to travel such a great distance while also attending university. Later that evening, Jung-ho was quietly sitting in his apartment while eating his dinner. As he continued enjoying his meal, his phone suddenly vibrated with a new message. It was from Soo-yeon. In her message, she sincerely apologized once again for everything that had happened the previous night. She admitted that it must have been extremely difficult for him to take care of her after she had become so drunk, and she felt genuinely sorry for causing him so much inconvenience. After reading her message, Jung-ho simply smiled before replying that everything was completely fine and that she did not need to apologize anymore because he did not mind helping her at all. At that same time, Soo-yeon was already back at the fitness center when one of the staff members approached her and asked whether she could lead the aerobics class. She immediately agreed with an excited smile before making her way into the aerobics studio. As the session began, she energetically guided all of the participants through the exercises while continuously encouraging them. She enthusiastically praised everyone for working so hard and motivated them to keep pushing themselves throughout the training session. Miss Jung was also present in the aerobics room, and after the class ended, she walked over to Soo-yeon with a curious expression on her face. She asked whether Soo-yeon was personally acquainted with the prospective member who had visited the gym the previous day, because the way they had interacted did not seem like an ordinary relationship. Hearing the question, Soo-yeon smiled before calmly explaining that Jung-ho was actually her son. Miss Jung immediately became surprised and could hardly believe what she had just heard. She commented that Soo-yeon did not look nearly old enough to have such a grown-up son. Soo-yeon gently laughed before explaining that Jung-ho was not her biological son. Instead, he was the son of the man she had almost married many years ago. Upon hearing that explanation, Miss Jung curiously asked whether that man had been handsome enough for Soo-yeon to willingly accept becoming the mother of a child who was already so grown up. Soo-yeon smiled warmly as she remembered the man she had loved. She admitted that he had been extremely handsome, but more importantly, he had been incredibly kind, caring, and attentive toward both her and Jung-ho. She quietly confessed that she had always believed they would have become a truly wonderful and happy family if fate had not cruelly separated them. Meanwhile, after finishing his classes for the day, Jung-ho left the university building and started walking toward the exit. Suddenly, a girl named Hyein began running after him while repeatedly calling out his name. After finally catching up to him, she complained that she had been calling him ever since he had walked out of the classroom, yet he had not responded even once. Jung-ho calmly turned toward her and jokingly remarked that she had certainly worked very hard just to catch his attention before asking whether there was something she wanted from him. Hyein immediately became irritated and asked whether he honestly believed she had been joking when she had previously told him to keep contacting her. Without waiting for an answer, she admitted that she was feeling hungry and suggested that the two of them should go out and eat pasta together. However, Jeong-ho politely apologized and explained that he already had plans because he was meeting another woman. The moment those words left his mouth, Hyun dramatically accused him of cheating on her. Jong-ho immediately denied her accusation and calmly pointed out that it was unfair for her to say something like that. He reminded her that she herself had gone out to eat with a senior from another department after specifically telling him not to contact her. Hyun quickly defended herself by insisting that nothing had happened between them and that they had simply shared a meal because the senior had offered to treat her. Jong-ho then clarified that the woman he was meeting was simply an older woman whom he had known for a long time. However, Hyun refused to listen. She angrily shouted that if he walked away now, then their relationship would truly come to an end. She declared that if ending things was really what he wanted, then he was free to leave. Before he could respond, she continued insulting him, claiming that someone as arrogant as him would have remained a completely useless man with no stamina or physical fitness if she had never agreed to date him in the first place. Despite hearing all of her harsh words, Jong-ho chose not to argue with her. He quietly turned around and continued walking away without looking back even once. As she watched him disappear into the distance, Hyun confidently thought to herself that he would eventually regret leaving her. She believed that sooner or later he would come back to her crying, and when that day arrived, she would decide whether or not to accept him again. A short while later, Jeong-ho met Soo-yeon at a nearby cafe. As soon as they sat down together, Soo-yeon warmly smiled and told him that he could order absolutely anything he wanted because she wanted to treat him to a nice meal. While looking through the menu, Jeong-ho suddenly remembered that Hyun had suggested eating pasta earlier that day. Thinking that it sounded appealing, he decided to order a pasta dish. Soo-yeon happily agreed with his choice and encouraged him to order whatever he liked without worrying about the price. While waiting for their food to arrive, Soo-yeon admitted that there was something she had been curious about ever since that morning. She explained that the location of his apartment seemed extremely unusual because it was located so far away from the fitness center. She honestly could not understand why he traveled such an incredible distance every day simply to exercise there. Jong-ho calmly explained that everything would soon change because he was planning to move into a new apartment near the gym over the upcoming weekend. He also mentioned that the university he currently attended was located close to that area as well, making it much more convenient for both his studies and his training sessions. Although she understood his explanation, Soo-yeon still looked concerned. She pointed out that the rent in that neighborhood was famously expensive and worried that it would place too much financial pressure on him. Jong-ho reassured her that everything was already under control. He explained that he had managed to obtain a loan by using the office his late father had left behind as collateral. Even after hearing that explanation, Soo-yeon still seemed worried about him. Jong-ho smiled reassuringly and insisted that everything was perfectly fine. He proudly told her that he had successfully signed the lease agreement for the new apartment without encountering any problems at all. However, deep inside his heart, he quietly admitted to himself that there was still one problem he needed to solve. Remembering that he would soon be moving, Soo-yeon asked him what he planned to do with all of his luggage. She kindly offered to let him store his belongings at her place and assured him that she would never ask him to pay any additional money for doing so. Before Jong-ho could give her a proper answer, his phone suddenly began ringing. He glanced at the screen before politely apologizing to Soo-yeon. He explained that he only needed to take the call for a moment, excused himself from the table, and quietly walked outside the cafe to answer the phone. He was reminded of the conversation he had recently had with Soo-yeon regarding his upcoming move. He had called Soo-yeon to ask her for a small favor. He told her that he was in the middle of preparing for the move and was having difficulty figuring out what to do with all of his belongings. Feeling slightly embarrassed, he had asked whether he could at least leave his luggage at her apartment for a short period until he had completely settled into his new place. At first, Jong-ho had believed that she would simply agree to keep his luggage for a few days. However, Soo-yeon had immediately rejected that idea. Instead of offering to look after only his belongings, she had insisted that he should move into her apartment altogether. She reminded him that her apartment had an extra room that was sitting empty and told him that there was no reason for him to struggle elsewhere when he could simply stay with her. Jong-ho had immediately refused her offer. He felt that it would be too much of an inconvenience, and he did not want to impose on her kindness. However, Soo-yeon refused to back down. With a playful smile, she began teasing him in a friendly manner. She jokingly declared that if he refused to move in with her, then she would also refuse to keep his luggage at her apartment. Since she continued refusing to keep his luggage unless he agreed to stay with her, he eventually gave in and accepted her offer. Even so, he could not help smiling to himself as he jokingly thought that she was incredibly cruel for taking his luggage hostage just to force him into moving in with her. He also quietly wondered whether she still thought of him as the little boy she had cared for many years ago instead of the grown-up he had become. Not long afterward, Jong-ho arrived at Soo-yeon's apartment. As soon as he stepped inside, he carefully looked around the living room. The apartment was much messier than he had expected. Clothes were lying around in several places, and various household items had been left scattered throughout the room. Looking at the untidy surroundings, he quietly smiled to himself. He thought that if Soo-yeon ever saw the poor condition he had been living in before, she would probably think twice before inviting him to stay with her. His thoughts soon drifted back to the time when they had lived together years ago. Even back then, Soo-yeon had never been particularly good at cleaning or organizing the house. Whenever she struggled to tidy up, he had often helped her with the household chores despite being much younger. She had always praised him for being dependable and complimented him whenever he finished cleaning the house. Since she had kindly allowed him to stay in her apartment without asking for anything in return, Jong-ho felt that the least he could do was help around the house. He decided that cleaning the apartment would be his way of repaying her kindness. Without wasting any time, he rolled up his sleeves and began organizing everything. He carefully picked up the scattered belongings, wiped down the furniture, cleaned every corner of the apartment, and neatly arranged everything that had been left out of place. After spending quite some time working, he finally finished cleaning, and the apartment looked completely different. Feeling satisfied with the results, Jong-ho noticed that there was still a pile of laundry waiting to be washed. Thinking that he might as well finish all of the household chores while he was already cleaning, he gathered the clothes together and prepared to start the laundry. However, as he sorted through the clothing, he suddenly noticed that some of Soo-yeon's personal clothing items were mixed in with the rest of the laundry. The unexpected sight immediately caused him to freeze. He hesitated for several moments, unsure of what he should do. Part of him wanted to ignore them completely and continue washing only his own clothes. He found himself staring at the garments while trying to convince himself that he should not pay any attention to them. Almost immediately, his conscience began reminding him that he already had a girlfriend and that he should never even think about doing something inappropriate like that. He repeatedly told himself that he should simply continue with the laundry and stop letting his curiosity get the better of him. Even so, he found it surprisingly difficult to completely ignore what he had seen. Trying to justify his wandering thoughts, Jong-ho remembered how his girlfriend constantly criticized him because of his weight. She frequently made sarcastic remarks about his appearance and repeatedly told him to lose weight and improve his physique. Thinking about all of those comments made him feel slightly frustrated. He even found himself blaming her for putting those complicated thoughts into his head, especially because she always muttered things about his body whenever they trained together during fitness training. Wanting to clear his mind, Jong-ho decided that the best way to distract himself would be to focus on training instead. He attempted to shift all of his attention toward a solo practice drill, imagining Soo-yeon as his core training partner while practicing his techniques and trying to regain his concentration. However, just as he was about to continue his training, the door suddenly opened. Before he had any chance to react, Soo-yeon walked into the room. Feeling both embarrassed and nervous, he silently wondered whether he had just gotten himself into a very big misunderstanding and feared that he might now be in serious trouble. The moment Jong-ho saw Soo-yeon enter the room, he immediately thought that he was about to get himself into serious trouble and desperately tried to come up with some kind of excuse before she noticed anything unusual. However, before he could say anything, Soo-yeon slowly walked toward the bed and lay down without paying any attention to him. Watching her carefully, Jong-ho soon realized that she was heavily intoxicated. He remembered that whenever she drank too much, she would completely black out and usually remembered nothing after waking up the next day. Realizing that she was completely drunk, he felt a small sense of relief. He quietly thought that she would probably never remember what had happened if she had blacked out. Believing that he could avoid being caught, he carefully decided that if he simply placed her clothes into the washing machine, there would be no evidence left behind. Even so, he reminded himself that he needed to be extremely careful and avoid making even the slightest noise. Just then, Soo-yeon began complaining about how hot the room felt. While mumbling to herself about the heat, she started adjusting her outfit in an attempt to cool herself down. Watching her absent-minded behavior, Jong-ho quietly reflected that she had not changed at all over the years. Ever since they had lived together in the past, she had always been unusually sensitive to hot weather and frequently complained whenever the temperature became too high. Trying to distract himself and calm his racing thoughts, Jong-ho decided to focus on a one-on-one training session in order to clear his mind. After finishing his training, he quietly returned to his own room. As he lay down on his bed, he could not stop thinking about everything that had happened. The embarrassment continued to linger in his mind, and he became convinced that he would not even be able to look Soo-yeon in the face the following morning. The next morning, Soo-yeon slowly woke up with another painful hangover. As she rubbed her forehead, she quietly complained to herself that she had probably drunk far too much the previous night. Since she was already familiar with her own drinking habits, she knew exactly why she was feeling so miserable. While trying to remember the previous evening, she suddenly reminded herself that she was no longer living alone. Feeling slightly embarrassed, she sincerely hoped that Jong-ho had not heard her making any strange noises while she had been drunk. Meanwhile, Jong-ho was trying to convince himself that everything was under control. He silently reassured himself that he had already removed every trace that could possibly make the previous night seem suspicious. He believed that there was no way Soo-yeon could discover anything. He even prepared himself mentally, deciding that if she asked him about anything unusual, he would simply answer that he did not know what she was talking about. While he was standing beside the washing machine, completely absorbed in his thoughts, Soo-yeon suddenly approached him from behind without making any noise. Her unexpected arrival startled him so badly that he nearly jumped in surprise. Seeing his reaction, she immediately asked why he looked so frightened. Trying to calm himself, Jong-ho awkwardly replied that she had suddenly called out to him without warning, which had startled him. Before she could continue the conversation, he quickly changed the subject by asking whether she was feeling any better after drinking so much the previous night. He even offered to boil some water for her in case it would help her recover from the hangover. Soo-yeon gently told him that she was feeling fine before explaining that there was actually something she wanted to ask him. Hearing those words immediately made Jong-ho tense up once again. She calmly stated that she wanted to know about something that had happened the previous day. The instant he heard her mention the previous day's incident, Jong-ho felt all the color drain from his face. Countless anxious thoughts flooded his mind at once, and he became convinced that this was the moment everything was about to be exposed. Inwardly, he felt as though his life was already over. After seeing the anxious expression on Jong-ho's face, Soo-yeon calmly explained that she honestly could not remember anything that had happened the previous night. Pretending that nothing had happened, he casually replied that he did not know anything either. Still trying to remember the previous night, Soo-yeon asked whether she had said anything strange or behaved in an embarrassing way while she was drunk. Jong-ho silently panicked, wondering whether she was somehow beginning to remember everything. However, before he could become even more nervous, she explained that she had only noticed the laundry spinning in the washing machine that morning. Hearing that explanation immediately filled Jong-ho with relief. Maintaining a calm expression, he simply told her that she had not done anything embarrassing at all. He explained that he had only gathered the dirty laundry and placed everything into the washing machine. He reassured her that she had done nothing wrong and that there was absolutely nothing for her to worry about. After hearing his explanation, Soo-yeon smiled with relief and sincerely thanked him for helping her. At the same time, Jong-ho also felt an enormous weight lift from his shoulders. Deep inside, he was simply grateful that she had not discovered anything and that his secret was still safe. As Soo-yeon looked around the apartment, she suddenly noticed how incredibly neat and organized everything had become. She commented that the house looked much cleaner than usual and wondered when all of that cleaning had been done. Jong-ho honestly admitted that he had cleaned the apartment himself. He explained that after living alone for such a long time, his cleaning skills had naturally improved because he had become responsible for taking care of everything by himself. Upon hearing that, Soo-yeon jokingly pouted and playfully accused him of indirectly saying that she possessed no life skills at all. She laughed while looking around the spotless apartment and remarked that the place had never looked so clean before. Jong-ho quickly told her not to make jokes like that again because she had frightened him badly only a few moments earlier, and his heart had almost stopped from the shock. Trying to change the subject, Soo-yeon realized that neither of them had eaten breakfast yet. She cheerfully suggested that she would prepare something for both of them right away. However, before she could head toward the kitchen, Jong-ho gently stopped her and explained that he had already prepared some hangover soup, especially for her because he knew she would be feeling unwell after drinking so much. The two of them sat down together and quietly began eating breakfast. After taking several bites, Soo-yeon's eyes brightened with surprise. She happily complimented the soup, saying that it was incredibly delicious. She praised Jong-ho's cooking skills and joked that someone who could cook so well should already be married by now. Feeling embarrassed by the compliment, Jong-ho humbly replied that his cooking was not good enough to deserve such praise. He then smiled and admitted that the meals she had cooked for him when he was younger had always been delicious as well. Hearing that made Soo-yeon smile warmly before asking whether he truly still remembered the taste of the food she had prepared so many years ago. Jong-ho nodded and admitted that he remembered those meals very clearly. He explained that he had often tried to recreate the same flavors while cooking by himself, but no matter how hard he practiced, he still believed his cooking was far from matching hers. His answer made Soo-yeon genuinely happy. Smiling proudly, she promised that she would personally prepare dinner for him that evening. While they continued eating together, Soo-yeon suddenly became curious about something else. She asked whether he really had a girlfriend. She explained that because he was so capable of cooking, cleaning, and taking care of himself while living independently, she had naturally assumed that he must already be dating someone. The sudden question caught Jong-ho by surprise. For a brief moment, he silently wondered whether she had somehow remembered something from the previous night and was trying to confirm her suspicions. However, after calming himself, he simply admitted that he did indeed have a girlfriend. He also confessed that they had recently argued and that things between them had become a little awkward, although the disagreement had happened almost by accident. Listening to his explanation, Soo-yeon quietly assumed that it was simply a normal disagreement between a young couple and that they had probably misunderstood each other during one of their usual personal battles. Smiling gently, She advised him that she did not know exactly what had happened between them, but she hoped he would make peace with his girlfriend as soon as possible, instead of allowing the misunderstanding to grow worse. Jong-ho nodded in agreement and promised that he would try to resolve everything properly. After finishing breakfast, Jong-ho stood up and explained that he should start getting ready because it was almost time for his university classes. Soo-yeon immediately told him not to worry about the dishes because she would wash everything herself. Thanking her, Jong-ho returned to his room to prepare for college. While changing his clothes, he quietly reflected on everything that had happened that morning. He admitted to himself that he had been genuinely surprised by the conversation they had just shared. Even after all those years, Soo-yeon still treated him like the little boy she had once taken care of. More importantly, she truly seemed unable to remember anything that had happened the previous night. He silently concluded that it would have become an enormous problem if she had recovered those memories. Deciding that the incident should remain buried forever, he promised himself that he would keep it locked deep inside his heart and never speak about it again. A few moments later, he walked back into the living room and saw Soo-yeon quietly washing the dishes. As soon as she noticed him, she asked whether he was already leaving for college. She kindly offered to drive him there herself if he was running late for his classes. However, Jong-ho politely declined the offer and explained that he would be fine going by himself. Soo-yeon smiled and accepted his decision before reminding him that she would see him again at dinner that evening. After Jong-ho left the apartment, Soo-yeon quietly watched him disappear from sight. She found herself smiling without realizing it. She reflected on how surprised she had been to see how energetic, responsible, and mature he had become. She still could not understand why he had seemed so nervous and excited throughout the morning, but she chose not to think too deeply about it. Instead, she quietly thought that the girl who was dating someone as kind, hardworking, and considerate as Jong-ho must be an incredibly lucky person. Meanwhile, Jong-ho's girlfriend, Hyun, was also walking across the university campus. While making her way toward her classes, she found herself thinking about Jong-ho once again. Although she was still frustrated after their recent argument, she secretly wished that they could somehow settle things between them. She could not understand why she continued thinking about him, despite being angry. Deep down, she admitted to herself that Jong-ho was actually an amazing person. Even so, she still believed that his weight was the one thing she simply could not overlook, and that remained a major reason for her dissatisfaction. Just then, Jong-ho happened to walk past her while hurrying toward his lecture. Seeing him, Hyun immediately called out and stopped him before he could continue walking. She complained that he had not even greeted her when they crossed paths. Jong-ho apologized and explained that he was already running late for his lecture and needed to hurry. However, Hyun ignored his explanation. She bluntly replied that she did not care whether he was late or not. She ordered him to make time for her after his classes were over because she wanted to talk to him. Before leaving, she reminded him that whenever she sent him a message, he was expected to reply immediately instead of making her wait. She insisted that he should understand that much, before turning around and walking away without giving him a chance to respond. Based on her attitude, he quietly assumed that she was probably calling him out because she wanted to have another one of their usual confrontations, and he mentally prepared himself for yet another exhausting training match between them. Meanwhile, on the other side, Soo-yeon was in the kitchen preparing dinner for Jong-ho. While she was still cooking, she suddenly received a message from him. In his text, Jong-ho informed her that he had decided to meet one of his friends and that he would be coming home much later than expected. He also asked her not to wait for him and instead advised her to go to bed early. After reading his message, Soo-yeon could not hide her disappointment. She quietly thought to herself that she had been putting so much effort into preparing something delicious for him and had genuinely wanted to make him a special meal for once. At the same time, Jong-ho was with Hyun, and the two of them arrived at a hotel together. As they entered, Hyun remarked that they should begin practicing their relaxing stretch routine. She expressed that she hoped it would not be the last time they trained together like this, and that their future sessions would produce even better results. Jong-ho agreed with everything she said, and without wasting any more time, the two of them began their relaxing stretch routine training. Once their training was over, Jong-ho left the hotel and started making his way home. While he was on the way, he received a call from Soo-yeon. As soon as he answered, he immediately began apologizing. He explained that after meeting his friends, they had gone to a karaoke place for another round of hanging out. He further told her that his phone had been set to vibration mode, which was why he had failed to notice her call. He continued by saying that he had genuinely intended to leave much earlier, but one of his friends had just been dumped by his girlfriend. Because of that situation, he had stayed behind to drink with him and comfort him, and while doing so, he had completely lost track of time. He apologized once again and explained that this was the reason he had ended up coming home so late. After listening to his explanation, Soo-yeon calmly replied that everything was all right. She told him that she had not called because she wanted to confirm whether he was telling the truth. Hearing that, Jong-ho wondered if there had been something urgent that had made her call him. Soo-yeon explained that there had been nothing urgent at all. She said that she had only called because she had been worried about when he would return home. She then asked whether he still remembered the passcode for the front door. Jung-ho honestly admitted that he had completely forgotten it. Soo-yeon smiled and told him that she had expected him to forget because he still was not used to remembering the code. She informed him that she had already sent it to him through a text message and told him to check it whenever he had the chance. Before ending the conversation, she also reminded him not to drink too much and asked him to come back home safely. Jung-ho then replied that he was already on his way home. Soo-yeon wondered whether she had interrupted him while he was still with his friends. However, Jung-ho assured her that she had not interrupted anything because he had already been about to leave when he finally checked his phone. Before hanging up, Soo-yeon gently asked whether he would like her to prepare some hangover soup for him after he returned home. Although he desperately wanted the soup, he immediately replied that it would not be necessary. As the call ended, he unconsciously imagined himself arriving home and seeing Soo-yeon preparing warm hangover soup for him just like she always used to in the past. For a brief moment, that image remained in his mind before he suddenly returned to reality. He quietly thought that Soo-yeon was once again trying to look after him like a child and was caring for him in exactly the same way she had done before. At the same time, another strange thought crossed his mind. He remembered that earlier, during his time with Hyun, he had momentarily mistaken Hyun for Soo-yeon. Realizing that made him feel even more confused. Lost in those thoughts, he had unknowingly left Hyun behind without paying attention. Meanwhile, Hyun attempted to call Jung-ho, but every time she tried, his phone was busy. She became increasingly irritated because she could not understand who he was talking to for such a long time. Feeling more and more frustrated, she eventually sent him a text message telling him to call her back immediately if he did not want to get himself killed. However, by the time she sent that message, Jung-ho had already reached home. After entering the house, Jung-ho found Soo-yeon waiting for him in the kitchen. She immediately asked whether he had drunk a lot that night. Jung-ho simply replied that he had not. She then informed him that she had already prepared hangover soup for him. As he looked toward her, he suddenly realized that she was dressed in light loungewear. Seeing the embarrassed expression on his face, Soo-yeon teasingly remarked that he had already grown up so much, yet he was still becoming shy after seeing something like that. Jung-ho awkwardly responded that it was only natural because he was already a college student. Soo-yeon then asked whether he was hungry and told him that she would bring him some rice as well. However, Jung-ho explained that he had already eaten plenty of snacks earlier, so the soup alone would be more than enough for him. A few moments later, Soo-yeon served the meal in front of him. As Jung-ho began eating, he immediately realized just how delicious the soup tasted. Every spoonful made him enjoy it even more, and without realizing it, Soo-yeon quietly watched him enjoying the meal with amusement. After he had completely finished the soup, she smiled and commented that he had eaten it so deliciously that simply watching him had made her feel full. She jokingly added that he could probably even become a mukbang creator because of the way he enjoyed food. Hearing that, Jung-ho smiled and replied that the only reason he had eaten so much was because her cooking skills had become incredibly good and he simply could not stop eating. His compliment made Soo-yeon very happy, and she cheerfully told him that she would prepare another delicious meal for him the following day as well. After that, Soo-yeon gently reached out and touched him before commenting that she felt he had gained even more weight compared to the previous day. Jung-ho explained that it was probably because he had been eating a lot lately. She laughed and teasingly remarked that he had become quite chubby. Then she asked whether he planned to join a fitness center. Her question instantly reminded Jung-ho of the first time he had gone to the fitness center. As he thought back, he quietly realized that the only reason he had started going there in the first place was because of Hyun. However, after everything that had happened between them earlier that day, he felt that he no longer had any reason to continue going there. While he was still thinking about it, Soo-yeon suggested that he should register himself because she would personally become his trainer at the fitness center. Hearing that made Jung-ho genuinely happy, and he immediately agreed because he liked the idea of having her as his personal trainer. Not wanting to waste any time, Soo-yeon enthusiastically suggested that they should begin training right away. Jung-ho reminded her that it was already nighttime and that every fitness center would already be closed by then. Without being discouraged, Soo-yeon suggested that they could simply exercise at home instead. Soon afterward, the two of them went outside together and headed toward the nearby park, where they began jogging. As Jung-ho continued running, he found himself becoming exhausted. He silently wondered why he had to suffer so much in the middle of the night, and thought that there was nothing enjoyable about doing such intense exercise at that hour. Noticing his struggle, Soo-yeon encouraged him by explaining that it only felt so difficult because it was his very first time running like this. She then motivated him by promising that if he managed to run all the way to the end, she would give him whatever gift he wanted. Hearing that promise immediately gave Jung-ho renewed determination, and he agreed to keep running because he sincerely wanted to become a man who would be worthy of standing beside her. Motivated by Soo-yeon's promise of a reward, Jung-ho pushed himself to run much faster along the walking track than he normally would have. As soon as he reached the end, He was about to collapse onto the ground from fatigue. However, Soo-yeon immediately stopped him and explained that he should not lie down right after running. She told him that if he failed to stretch and properly cool down his muscles, they would become stiff and extremely sore the following day. Without wasting any time, she began guiding him through a series of stretching exercises to help his body recover. As they continued stretching, Jong-ho complained that his body had suddenly become so stiff that he did not think he could continue anymore. He admitted that every part of him felt sore and suggested that they should simply take it easy for the rest of the night. Soo-yeon, however, refused to let him give up so easily. She pointed out that he was only making excuses because he was tired. She explained that even if he exaggerated how exhausted he felt, his muscles would still become sore if he skipped the proper cool-down exercises. While watching him struggle through the stretches, she quietly thought to herself that he had really grown up. Even so, she continued encouraging him and gently instructed him to focus on his breathing by doing proper breathing exercises until his body relaxed. After they finished exercising, the two of them sat down together and began drinking beer after their jog. Jong-ho looked at Soo-yeon with a slightly dissatisfied expression and remarked that he had been the one who had gone through all the hard work during the run. In response, Soo-yeon casually replied that she had simply been following along beside him and reminded him that running itself also counted as exercise for her. Jong-ho then wondered aloud whether it was actually all right to drink beer immediately after exercising. He jokingly questioned whether that meant all of their hard work had been completely pointless. Soo-yeon smiled before explaining that having a small amount of alcohol after exercising was perfectly acceptable as long as it remained within a reasonable limit. She reminded him that he should already know what the acceptable limit was. After noticing that he was about to drink even more, she stopped him and firmly told him that he had already had enough and should not drink another sip. A little while later, Soo-yeon remembered the friend Jong-ho had mentioned meeting earlier that evening. Out of curiosity, she asked whether that friend had really been a boy or whether it had actually been his girlfriend instead. Jong-ho admitted that it had been his girlfriend. Soo-yeon recalled that he had previously mentioned that the two of them had gotten into a fight, so she asked whether they had managed to make up with each other. Jong-ho replied that they had, although he admitted that things still felt a little awkward whenever he saw her. As he answered, he quietly felt a sense of guilt building inside him. Wanting to understand the situation better, Soo-yeon asked what had caused the argument in the first place. She told him that he was such a kind person that she could not imagine his girlfriend becoming angry with him without a reason. Hearing her words made Jong-ho even more uncomfortable because he knew he could not honestly tell her that the real reason for the fight had been that they could not have their fitness training together. Instead, he lied and explained that they had argued because he had admitted feeling embarrassed. After hearing his explanation, Soo-yeon became visibly frustrated. She complained that his girlfriend seemed to think far too highly of herself and acted as though she were too amazing for him. Listening to her words, Jong-ho realized that she had unknowingly been referring to herself. Believing that she had become slightly drunk, he suggested that they should stop drinking and head back home. As he thought about everything she had just said, he realized that it was probably the first time she had spoken so openly because she was intoxicated, and for some reason, that thought made him genuinely happy. While they were preparing to leave, Soo-yeon happily suggested that they should drink the homemade plum wine she had prepared once they got home. Jong-ho immediately pointed out that they had already exercised and probably should not continue drinking so much alcohol afterward. However, Soo-yeon cheerfully replied that it would be fine just for that day. She said that they could simply work even harder starting the following day. As Jong-ho listened to her words, he quietly smiled to himself. Afterward, the two of them returned home together and opened the homemade plum wine. They sat down and continued drinking while chatting peacefully. Before long, Jong-ho began to feel a headache coming on. As he looked around, he suddenly realized that Soo-yeon was no longer in the room. He assumed that she had already gone to her room and fallen asleep. Feeling sleepy himself, he decided that he should also head to bed. He quietly reminded himself that he had a lecture the following afternoon, so getting a good night's sleep would be the best decision. Jong-ho entered the bathroom without expecting anyone to be inside, but the moment he stepped in, he realized that Soo-yeon was already there. Startled by the unexpected situation, he quietly closed the door behind him and tried to calm himself down. He kept thinking that Soo-yeon had drunk so much alcohol that she had completely blacked out, and because of that, she would most likely not remember anything that had happened by the time she woke up the next morning. He reassured himself that even if he had accidentally seen her in such a state, it would not really matter because she would have no memory of it. However, another thought quickly crossed his mind. Since she was heavily intoxicated, she might actually need someone's help. He convinced himself that helping her would simply be a medical act rather than anything inappropriate. With that in mind, he cautiously called out to her, asking whether she was all right or if she had fallen asleep inside the bathroom. Despite speaking to her several times, she gave no response at all. He soon realized that she had completely blacked out and was lying there unconscious. Seeing her in that condition, Jong-ho felt that he could not simply leave her sleeping on the cold bathroom floor throughout the night. He believed that doing nothing would only make things worse for her. After thinking about the situation for a few moments, he concluded that he had no other choice. He carefully covered her body with a towel so that she would not be exposed, and then gently lifted her into his arms. Making sure not to hurt her, he slowly carried her out of the bathroom and brought her into the room. Afterward, the two of them decided to have a relaxing stretch routine with each other. Once everything had been completed, Jong-ho carefully laid Soo-yeon down on the bed, making sure that she was resting comfortably. After confirming that she was safely asleep, he quietly left the room and returned to his own. As soon as he entered his room, Jong-ho suddenly remembered that someone had been calling him while he had been occupied earlier. Curious, he picked up his phone and checked the missed notifications. The moment he saw the screen, he realized that the missed call had been from Hyun. His expression immediately changed as he thought that he was now in serious trouble. He remembered that he had deliberately declined the call because he had been afraid that the ringtone would wake Soo-yeon up while she was sleeping. At that moment, he had believed that rejecting the call had been the safest option, but now he realized that Hyun would probably wonder why he had ignored her. Feeling guilty, Jong-ho decided that he should call her back as soon as possible. Once Hyun answered the phone, he immediately apologized for not picking up her call earlier. He explained that he had been exercising at the time, which was why he had not been able to answer. He reminded her that he had already mentioned before that he had been struggling because of his belly fat and that it had been affecting his confidence. Because of that, he had finally become motivated to start working out more seriously and had been focusing on exercising whenever he had the chance. After hearing his explanation, Hyun happily replied that it was actually a good thing and that she was glad he had decided to take care of himself. She then casually asked whether he was at home. Without waiting for much of a response, she told him to come outside because she was already standing just outside his apartment building. The moment Jong-ho heard those words, he froze in panic. He immediately thought that the situation had become much worse than he had expected. He still had not told Hyun that he had already moved out of his previous apartment. Even more importantly, he absolutely could not let her find out that he was now living together with Soo-yeon. He knew that if she discovered the truth, it would become impossible for him to explain everything. Trying to avoid the situation, Jong-ho quickly came up with an excuse. He told Hyun that he was not at home because he had gone over to a friend's house to learn some new exercise techniques and that he was still there at the moment. Hyun replied that it was fine because she would simply wait until he returned home. However, Jong-ho immediately stopped her and explained that she would have to wait for a very long time if she stayed there. Instead, he suggested that they meet at the Han River since it was exactly halfway between the two of them, making it much more convenient. After thinking about it for a moment, Hyun agreed with his suggestion, and the two of them decided to meet there instead. After ending the phone call, Hyun quietly reflected on the conversation. She could not shake the feeling that Jong-ho seemed to be hiding something from her. His behavior had felt slightly unusual, and his explanation had not completely convinced her. Later that night, the two of them met at the Han River as they had planned. As soon as Hyun saw Jong-ho, she smiled brightly and commented that he looked unusually excited. She then playfully asked him whether he wanted to have a stretching session with her. However, Jong-ho immediately refused her suggestion. He told her that it was already very late at night and that she should stop fooling around. He insisted that she should simply head back home before it became even later. While saying those words, Jong-ho could not help thinking that Hyun was still treating him as though he were her ex-boyfriend. Hyun pouted after hearing his refusal and teasingly called him a coward. She confidently told him that he would definitely regret turning down her challenge. Jong-ho still refused and explained that it would only become troublesome if someone happened to see the two of them fighting there in the middle of the night. Hyun simply laughed at his concern and pointed out that the only people wandering around the Han River at that hour were couples like them. She continued insisting over and over again, refusing to give up despite his repeated refusals. Eventually, after listening to her persistent requests for quite some time, Jong-ho finally gave in. Unable to refuse her any longer, he agreed to have a training match with her. The following morning, Soo-yeon slowly opened her eyes after waking up. As the memories of the previous night slowly began returning to her, she immediately became worried. Feeling anxious, she went to take a shower while countless thoughts ran through her mind. Throughout her shower, she kept wondering whether Jong-ho might have woken up because of the noises she had made during the previous night. She anxiously told herself that if Jong-ho had really been awakened because of her, then she would be in very serious trouble. Jong-ho and Hyun were in the middle of their stretching sessions when a female police officer suddenly arrived at the scene. The instant Jong-ho noticed her presence, he immediately realized that both of them were about to get themselves into serious trouble. The police officer approached them with a stern expression and demanded to know exactly why the two of them were there. She questioned the reason they were using the public place for such an activity and insisted that they explain themselves. Hyun calmly responded that it was simply a personal matter between the two of them, hoping that the explanation would be enough to settle the situation. However, the police officer was completely unimpressed by her answer. She stated that she was absolutely speechless after seeing what they had been doing. She went on to remark that they were not even Chinese, yet they had somehow managed to lose all of their common sense. She criticized them for performing such a public stunt without considering the consequences, and explained that what they had done could easily result in both of them being arrested. As the conversation continued, Hyun kept looking at the police officer more carefully. The officer's face seemed strangely familiar to her, and she began thinking that she had definitely seen her somewhere before. After staring at her for another moment, she suddenly realized that the officer was none other than Lee Suk-young, a former student from Hwai Girls High School. At almost the same moment, Suk-young also recognized Hyun, and both of them immediately realized that they already knew each other from their school days. Hyun smiled awkwardly and mentioned that she had heard Suk-young was planning to take the police officer examination immediately after graduation. She commented that it looked like Suk-young had managed to pass the examination on her very first attempt, and sincerely remarked that it was truly impressive and deserving of congratulations. Suk-young looked at Hyun for a moment before replying that she had not changed even a little since the last time they had met. According to Suk-young, Hyun was still exactly the same person she had always been. Hyun admitted that she had not recognized Suk-young at first because it had been such a long time since they had last seen each other. She then politely pleaded with her to let them off just this once and explained that Jong-ho was simply her boyfriend. She hoped that their previous friendship would convince Suk-young to overlook the incident and allow them to leave without any further trouble. However, Suk-young firmly refused to let their past friendship influence her decision. She explained that even if they had known each other